Chapter 921, Who could Zai Hanma blame? The person I'm taking you to see today is President Liu from Dongxing Film Studios. He has recently been working on a new program. It may be of help to us. If you can secure President Liu's support, we may be able to make a comeback. Understand? After hearing from Zhu King, Zai Hanma nodded her head. To put up a good battle, Zai Hanma was dressed to her nines and appeared in her best state. Soon, the couple arrived at a hotel. As soon as they stepped into the private room, they were met with a short and plump man sitting at a round dining table. Zai Hanma immediately felt a little uncomfortable, but Zhu King, on the other hand, walked straight up to the man. For some reason, Zai Hanma felt that Zhu King at this moment was very foreign. After all, President Liu's eyes were lustful and he had an extremely greasy vibe. One glance and one could tell that he wasn't a good person. In particular, when he looked at Zai Hanma, his eyes seemed to contain a desire to possess her. Because of this, Zai Hanma felt even more uncomfortable with the meeting they were having. "Come, Miss Zai, take a seat." Zai Hanma sat down between Zhu King and President Liu and tried to wrap her arm around Zhu King's arm for reassurance. But, Zhu King quickly shrugged her off before President Liu noticed. Zai Hanma immediately froze. President Liu likes to drink wine. "Hanma, why don't you have a few drinks with President Liu?" Zai Hanma looked at Zhu King in surprise. What type of person did he think she was? "Didn't you say that you'd help me? I need your help right now." "You're not planning to go back on your words, right?" Zai Hanma clenched her fists, but eventually loosened it again. "That's more like it. Who doesn't drink when they come out to play?" "Miss Zai needs to have 3 drinks as punishment." President Liu directly poured 3 glasses of red wine for Zai Hanma. After he watched her down all 3 glasses, he took advantage of the moment to touch her thigh. But, Zai Hanma immediately stood up and asked, "What are you doing?" "Zai, why are you giving such a big reaction?" President Liu laughed. "We're all out here to have fun, so why act annoyed?" Zai Hanma's face turned red, but she still sat back down. However, President Liu pushed his limits even further and almost ran his hand right up her skirt. Zai Hanma immediately picked up her wine glass and poured the contents all over the man. "I dare you to try touching me again." In response, President Liu stood up and yelled, "You slut! With your current status, you should be honored to sleep with me. How dare you pour wine all over me?" Hearing the words, "Sleep with me," Zai Hanma froze. She then turned and looked at the indifferent Zhu King in disbelief. "Don't tell me that you thought you'd get what you want without making any sacrifices. If you were still at Superstar Media, I would perhaps give you some face, but they have already disowned you. How dare you try to act innocent?" "Liuki, don't be angry. Hanma simply hasn't thought things over properly. Give us a moment." After speaking, Zhu King grabbed onto Zai Hanma and dragged her to the bathroom. He then threw her against the wall and trapped her between his arms. "All you have to do is have a few drinks. Can't you handle something so simple?" "His hand almost went up my skirt," Zai Hanma complained. "Then let him do it." Zai Hanma's eyes grew big, suddenly realizing what Zhu King was suggesting. It turned out, his intention was to sell her out. "Why are you so different to the Zhu King I used to know?" Zai Hanma asked. "I don't care. You need to secure this job for me." After their argument, the couple returned to the room. By this time, President Liu had calmed down. So, when he saw Zai Hanma, he simply said to her, "I actually admire your character. If you drink another 3 glasses as punishment, I'll pretend nothing happened today." Zai Hanma did not say a word as she held back her tears and emptied another 3 glasses straight into her stomach. However, she wasn't so lucky this time and ended up falling unconscious on the table. Zai Hanma never imagined that she'd fall into such a deep trap, especially when she woke up the next morning in a hotel room to the sight of President Liu getting dressed. Zai Hanma was stunned for a second, but she quickly threw a punch towards the man like she had lost her mind. "You're worse than a monster." Even though President Liu received a punch, he was in a good mood. This is an unspoken rule in the entertainment industry. "What? Don't tell me you didn't know about it." "Zhu King handed you directly into my hands." "That can't be possible." Zai Hanma refused to accept the truth. "That rascal has always been like that. By the way, he was also the one that ordered someone to break the station manager's son's arm." After he was done talking, the man smirked and left. Zai Hanma wanted to chase after him, but she was completely naked at that moment. She couldn't accept what had happened, but she could only return to the bed. However, the bed reminded her of how dirty she had become. No, this can't be. Saihanmo never imagined that she'd learn the truth from President Liu's mouth. Saihanmo cried in hysterics. Meanwhile, you've been in the hospital for so long and haven't eaten anything good. Let me take you to eat something tasty, Li Jin said as he brought Lin Qian to a hotel. She had been very quiet lately, so he decided to keep her company and cheer her up. I'm fine. Li Jin's thoughtfulness worked on Lin Qian. Li Jin wrapped his arm around Lin Qian and the couple headed into the hotel. However, at this time, they ran into a familiar figure at the entrance. Lin Qian looked at Saihanmo and Saihanmo looked at Lin Qian. Tears welled up in Saihanmo's eyes, but Lin Qian ignored her and turned away. Lin Qian, Saihanmo cried. Lin Qian was not moved by this person from her past, but Saihanmo chased after her and grabbed onto her hands. Regarding the incident with Zhu King, I misunderstood you and I wronged you. It was my mistake. However, Lin Qian simply said with no emotions, let go. Saihanmo was dumbfounded, but she did not move until Lin Qian added, what? Do you regret what you've done? It's only been a few days. Do you remember what Ningji said to you? Saihanmo took a step back as tears streamed from her eyes. Yes. I only have myself to blame. I did all this for a man, for a complete scoundrel. Saihanmo, we all choose our own paths. Don't blame yourself for meeting bad people, blame yourself for not analyzing people properly. Although I don't know what you've experienced, I don't like to strike someone while they're down. We no longer have anything to do with each other. I wish you all the best. After speaking, Lin Qian and Li Jin left to eat somewhere else, leaving Saihanmo all on her own. Did you arrange this? Lin Qian didn't believe in coincidences. How did they end up at the same hotel at the same time? Zhu King betrayed Saihanmo. My people found out about it and contacted me. Last night, Lin Qian understood what happened without Li Jin explaining any further. But, who could Saihanmo blame? Chapter 922. A vengeful woman is frightening. Qian, Li Jin called. I will not feel sympathy for those that once hurt me. Besides, Saihanmo is not worthy of sympathy. She chose her own path, so she should face the consequences on her own. It has nothing to do with anyone else. After hearing Lin Qian's response, Li Jin felt relieved. He was worried that she'd pity Saihanmo, but he was wrong. His Qian was no weakling. So, Li Jin relaxed. Let's order some food. Lin Qian nodded her head and quickly focused her gaze on the menu in her hands. On the other hand, after leaving the hotel, Saihanmo drove over to Zhu King's home. Unfortunately, when she arrived, she discovered that her keys no longer worked. Zhu King had replaced the locks. Meanwhile, all her belongings had been thrown out with the trash and was sitting in a pile of rubbish near the apartment block. The man was extremely heartless. But, she couldn't blame anyone for this result. She brought this upon herself because of her decisions. Saihanmo dropped to the ground. All of a sudden, she had lost everything. Yet, she was so confident in the past that Lin Qian had schemed against her. Now that she thought about it, she was simply embarrassed. It turned out, she was wrong from the start. Ha ha. As a result, she didn't blame Lin Qian for treating her like a stranger. It was what she deserved. After all, Lin Qian had been hurt so badly. At that moment, the person she hated the most was Zhu King. He had set so many traps to trick her into siding with him, and now that he was done with her, he simply kicked her aside. Yet, all she could do was sit and cry. Did Zhu King really think that he could return to the pinnacle of his career by using her? Saihanmo wasn't about to let it happen. She was going to make him pay back tenfold. Once a woman had this amount of hatred inside them, their body would become a frightening weapon. Did Zhu King think that the helpless Saihanmo would simply self-destruct? He was wrong. Because, Saihanmo directly turned around and went to look for President Liu. I am willing to be your mistress if you can agree to one condition. I want Zhu King's life to be a living hell. President Liu sat on his sofa as he smoked a cigar and laughed. No problem. I don't lose out with this deal. In fact, if you want to, You could even come to my company and partake in a film. I don't want to think about anything else. I just want Zhu King to suffer. You're welcome to think about it. I have always been generous towards women." Everything was beyond Zhu King's expectations. He never expected that Mo Ting had spoken to the station manager. He never expected that Tang Ning already had plans in place, and he especially didn't expect that Zai Hanmo would willingly become a mistress just to get back at him and make him suffer. He was currently basking in the joy of becoming the host of a new program, but President Liu kept his promise and directly handed the new program to Zai Hanmo. In other words, Zai Hanmo skipped over everyone and became the person in charge of the new program. So, from now on, Zhu King was directly under her. Zhu King. It was time for him to experience how frightening a vengeful woman was. Meanwhile, Tang Ning knew everything that was happening with Zai Hanmo. But in the end, she could only sigh. She never imagined that Zai Hanmo would go seek revenge. Perhaps, ending up with President Liu was the best result for her. After all, even though President Liu wasn't a decent person, he was very generous to women. There had long been rumors that he even praised his women after they broke up. I would love to see Zhu King's expression when he finds out that Zai Hanmo has become his boss. I'm sure he'll feel like he's in hell. Long Ji humphed. I hope Zai Hanmo puts extra effort into her revenge and not hold back. Tang Ning turned and looked at Long Ji. This woman had already been a mother for so long, yet her personality hadn't changed at all. There's a good show for you to watch. If that's the case, then doesn't that mean Zai Hanmo has found someone new to rely on? Would you be willing to be a mistress? Tang Ning asked. Of course not. This is the best form of torture for Zai Hanmo. Of course, if she manages to hold on to President Liu, then good for her. Even if we see her again in future, she will merely be a fellow industry peer. I won't disregard her, Tang Ning replied. A pitiful person was bound to have their hateful points. This sentence summed up Zai Hanmo's life. We can move on now and talk about the next person, Tang Ning said as she opened her laptop and showed Long Ji a recent email that she received. Is it a call for help? Long Ji read through the entire email with curiosity. She then said in shock, is this really something that happened in our industry? Tang Ning nodded her head. I've already asked Mo Ting to confirm it and he said it's true. The Fate Yuan Awards was currently a hot topic. Apart from Tang Ning, there were a few other nominees for Best Actress, and one of these nominees was the one that sent the email. I've decided to hand this artist to Lin Qian. I'm sure, after her experience with Zai Hanmo, she has a new approach to being a manager. Okay, I'll go organize it. Long Ji nodded her head. She had a feeling that another good show was on its way. Even though this year's Fate Yuan Awards didn't have much suspense. Ever since being pregnant with her daughter, Tang Ning had begun to reduce her workload. After all, her body was important and Mo Ting didn't want her to push herself too hard. Meanwhile, filming of The Ant Queen slowly improved with Coco's efforts and ran very smoothly. Practically every time that Kiao Sin filmed a climactic scene, he would praise Tang Ning for being smart. Because, if it wasn't for her suggestion to replace Kate with a child actor, The Ant Queen may have been delayed a few years before it can grace the screens. President Mo, after Tang Ning gives birth, tell her to come back and act. She is truly talented. Mo Ting looked at Kiao Sin without a word. Honestly, I think she can still contribute a lot to the film industry. We belong to each other, but we also respect each other. If she doesn't want to do something, I won't force her, Mo Ting replied. It's rare to see a loving couple like the two of you, especially within the entertainment industry. Actually, it wasn't hard to achieve, as long as they loved each other enough. Later that night, the weather was cold. While Mo Ting was still filming, Tang Ning prepared some chicken soup and delivered it to him. Didn't I tell you to wait for me at home, huh? All I do is sit around and wait at home. This is something simple that I can do for you. Tang Ning placed a bowl of boiling hot chicken soup in front of Mo Ting. Kiao Sin watched the couple from afar. To be exact, the entire crew was watching them with admiration, because it was clear to see from their actions whether they loved each other. Everything they did was for the other person and not for a second did they consider themselves. This was perhaps the best example of love. The next day, the program that President Liu invested in was ready to commence filming. But of course, he hadn't introduced the person in charge yet. This was bound to be the biggest surprise on set. After all, if there was a meeting, then Zhu King naturally had to attend. So, the show was going to be spectacular. Chapter 923, Savor this game slowly, you still have plenty of opportunities. Some people walk the same path, but some reached the end while others fell off the path into the abyss. This was what they called the vicissitudes of life. Even if Tangning tried her best, she couldn't avoid it. Zai Hanmo's incident didn't just hurt Lin Qian, it also made Tangning understand that giving up and saying goodbye were important lessons that she had to go through. Zai Hanmo was aware that she picked a path that sacrificed herself in order to get back at Zhu King, but, from what she saw, she had no other choice. From the moment that Zhu King betrayed her, she no longer cared about the long term nor the future. She simply wanted Zhu King to pay the price for what he had done. Before the meeting started, President Liu instructed inside the villa that he bought Zai Hanmo, "Don't be too ruthless. After all, you were once lovers. You should leave him a way out." Zai Hanmo was dressed in a little black suit, looking mature and vibrant. There wasn't much of an expression on her face because her feelings for President Liu were too complicated. Towards a man that used a sneaky method to possess her, it was only right for her to hate his guts, but he ended up giving her a new home and she willingly chose to be with him. She was originally on a wide and open path with plenty of potential, yet she chose to take the road to ruin. Now that she ended up like this, who could she blame? Zai Hanmo suddenly remembered the night at the abandoned amusement park. The night when Lin Qian appeared in front of her, covered in wounds. How hurt was Lin Qian at that time? Probably it would take her an entire lifetime and she still wouldn't be able to make up for the guilt that she felt towards Lin Qian. Okay, Zai Hanmo eventually agreed. However, they both knew deep down that Zai Hanmo couldn't possibly let Zhu King off. Soon, Zai Hanmo arrived downstairs at Dongxing Film Studios. As soon as the staff saw her, they realized that she was their new boss. How did this happen? Superstar Media got rid of this woman and then she followed Zhu King back to their old television station, didn't she? Why is she now our new boss? What other reason could there be? She must have crawled into President Liu's bed. I was wondering why he would put such a big project into the hands of a clueless woman. It turns out he's trying to please her. Let's not talk about it anymore. Since things have gotten to this stage and President Liu arranged it, then we should provide Miss Zai with our assistance. Although President Liu's private life wasn't something to brag about, he was well known for being reliable and experienced in management. On top of that, the company's staff trusted him and were loyal towards him. Of course, this was closely related to the fact that he gave them a lot of benefits. Soon, Zai Hanmo entered the television director's office and officially took control. Director Zai, the meeting is about to start. Zai Hanmo looked at her new secretary and nodded her head. Call me when everyone's arrived. Okay. The secretary knew how Zai Hanmo got her position, but she still maintained her respect because Zai Hanmo's life was interestingly filled with ups and downs. Soon, everyone involved in the program gathered in the meeting room. Zhu King also arrived, right on time, but the director's seat was still empty. So, everyone looked at each other confusedly. President Liu said the new television director will be in charge of this program. Where is this person? Calm down everyone, the director will be here very soon, Zai Hanmo's secretary reassured before she stepped out of the room. A few minutes later, the meeting room door flew open and Zai Hanmo stepped in. Everyone was so shocked that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. In particular, Zhu King thought she had come to cause trouble. So he immediately walked over to her and said, "You shouldn't be here. If you wanted to look for me, you should have waited outside." Zai Hanmo glanced at Zhu King mockingly and said in a cold tone, "I'm not here to look for you, Mr. Zhu. I think you've misunderstood. Since you're not here for me, then why are you here?" "I'm sorry Mr. Zhu, but everyone's waiting for Director Zai to start the meeting," Zai Hanmo's secretary warned. "Director Zai?" Zhu King stuttered. "That's right. I'm the new person in charge here, Zai Hanmo. I am looking forward to everyone's guidance." After introducing herself, Zai Hanmo walked over to the head of the table and sat down. Zhu Qing's face immediately turned pale. He never imagined Zai Hanmo to do something like this. How did she turn around and become his boss? Is President Liu sure that he wants to use a person like this as his television director? Zhu Qing looked at Zai Hanmo with doubt. But, as mentioned earlier, President Liu managed his people well. So, since he had made his decision, everyone followed fit. We trust in Director Zai and will not question her background. Since Director Zai is in charge now, everyone here at Dongxing will support her. What's wrong with that, Zhu Qing looked annoyed as he was rendered speechless. Mr. Zhu, if you plan to continue working here, I suggest you improve your attitude towards me. Zai Hanmo sneered. Everyone thinks you're a great person, but we all know who you truly are. Why continue with the act? You should be grateful for this opportunity that President Liu has given you. If you have any ulterior motives, I will immediately kick you out. Zhu Qing's face went from pale to red. Zai Hanmo had completely humiliated him. Without further ado, let's begin the meeting. President Liu had already prepared everything, so Zai Hanmo's appearance was just for formalities. In reality, her existence made no difference. Meanwhile, Zhu Qing was struggling to accept this outcome. He wanted to meet with President Liu and ask him for an explanation. Even a phone call would do. But, when he called President Liu's number, the person to pick up was Zai Hanmo. President, it's Zai Hanmo. Why did you pick up the phone? Hearing this question, Zai Hanmo laughed in response. Do you still need to ask? Didn't you deliver me right to President Liu's bed? Now that I've done what you wanted, why are you still questioning me? Zai Hanmo, you're disgusting. I can't compare to you, Zhu Qing. President Liu has already confirmed the incident with the station manager's son. You were the one that broke his arm. Did you still think that you have a way out? Must you be this ruthless? Zhu Qing ground his teeth angrily. I can go even further, Zai Hanmo said before she hung up. She really needed to thank President Liu for this result. Has this satisfied your hatred? President Liu asked as he took a puff of his cigar. It's not enough yet, Zai Hanmo replied. Ha ha, savor this game slowly, you still have plenty of opportunities. Let me be honest. Zhu Qing has nowhere to run. Actually been involved with this matter for a long time. Zhu Qing will gradually be tormented by the entire industry, a little bit at a time. After hearing this, Zai Hanmo understood that Hairu's involvement was due to Tang Ning and Lin Qian. You were doing well following Tang Ning, yet you decided to sacrifice yourself because of a man like this. Liu Changfeng, may not be a good person, but I've always been generous with women. If you want, I can make you famous. After hearing this, Zai Hanmo felt an even more complex mix of emotions. For some reason, she suddenly felt safe and protected. But, a moment later, she quickly snapped out of it. After all, how long would this last? Either way, President Liu was still better than the bustard, Zhu Qing. Zhu Qing simply lied to her and betrayed her. He had never done anything for her. After making the phone call, Zhu Qing did not learn to take precautions. Even though he knew that the station manager's son already knew the truth, he wasn't wary at all. A little while later, his doorbell rang. Zhu Qing immediately stood up and walked over to open the door. But, before he could even see the person in his doorway, a punch flew directly at him. Of course, the man was a professional. He knew he couldn't leave any obvious wounds on Zhu Qing's body, so he aimed for Zhu Qing's abdomen and threw a flurry of punches. You piece of trash. Let me warn you, from now on, I will appear in front of you every couple of days to give you a good beating. I've been paid to torment you for the rest of your life. I guess you area down on your luck. Zhu Qing lay on the ground, unable to move. His abdomen was throbbing in so much pain that he eventually fell unconscious. Tang Ning had said it before, this world worked on karma. What goes around, comes around. Zhu Qing's fate did not deserve sympathy. After all, to most people, he still appeared perfect on the surface. But, it was because of this that he suffered. All he had left was this outer shell for everyone to slowly play with. No one realized that Zhu Qing had been hurt. So, when he didn't show up at work the next day, Zai Hanmo asked the staff, why isn't Zhu Qing here today? I just made a phone call to him. It appears, Zhu Qi has been injured and is currently at the hospital. A staff member replied. What happened? Apparently, he was attacked at home. Zai Hanmo did not ask any further. She could already guess what this was all about. This was Zhu Qing's retribution that he had brought upon himself. Meanwhile, after Superstar Media kicked Zai Hanmo out of the agency, the public doubted their decision for a while. But, they knew that if even Tang Ning couldn't tolerate her, then Zai Hanmo definitely did something overboard this time. The only good outcome from the entire incident was the fact that Zai Hanmo did not complain nor argue back, just like when her manager betrayed her. This, at least, helped Superstar Media maintain what was left of their reputation. During this time, Luo Xing's acting career continued to improve and Xing Lan's status continued to rise. So, the public had high hopes for Tang Ning and many artists still dreamed of working under her. But, they were aware that Tang Ning only took in truly talented people that had been treated unfairly. As for everyone else, she did not take a single glance at them. Tang Ning handed Lin Qi on her new mission, the artist that had sent her an email asking for help. This artist was no longer flourishing in her youth. She was a 3-time Best Actress recipient who had unfortunately been disfigured, and the person that disfigured her was trying to take the best things from her and bask in everyone's love. So, she couldn't accept this outcome. Lin Qian met with Tang Ning. After looking at the artist's details, she glanced at her confusedly. Ningji, she's 40 and disfigured. Does she still want to act and return to the industry? I'm afraid this is too difficult of a challenge. Luo Xing and Xing Lan were young, good-looking and capable. They had a lot to offer. Their fame was easy to boost because they had a good fan base. But, this actress, why do you think I'm giving this job to you? The reason is simple. I don't think a person's spirit ever dies. I think she matches you well. I don't think an actor's value is determined by the amount of films they've been in or how much they've achieved, but by their willingness to contribute to the industry no matter how old they are. Look through all the information in your hands before you give me your opinion. Lin Qian was doubtful, but she still opened the portfolio. According to the information provided, this actress' career was smooth sailing during her early years. But because she was too kind-hearted, she trusted her assistant without realizing that the assistant wanted to replace her. At first, she represented her at events, then she acted as her substitute, and finally, she took away her awards and status. She even spiked her food and almost caused her to never walk again. It was at this time that she was left with a scar on her face. Who was her assistant? Feng Jing. Isn't she one of the nominees for the Fei Tian Awards? Lin Qian asked. Tang Ning nodded. Yes, that's her. Lin Qian was aware that Tang Ning despised those that advanced by stepping on others. So, there was no wonder that the email from this woman named Luo Yinghong was able to move her. So, what do you want me to do, Ningji? Sign her. As soon as Tang Ning said this, she immediately jumped into action. When the public heard about this, they were shocked. Because Tang Ning wasn't helping a young singer or a handsome idol, she was helping a disfigured and outdated 40-year-old actress. Has Tang Ning overdone herself this time? Not only is she old, she's also disfigured. Why would Tang Ning support someone that's been out of trend for so many years? What is she trying to do? If Tang Ning is able to make this woman famous again, I'm going to chop off my head and let her kick it around like a soccer ball. Of course, for Tang Ning to take interest in someone, it meant that this someone was mistreated in a very abnormal way. So, it was natural for the person that mistreated Luo Yinghong to feel nervous. And this person was Feng Jing. Her film was also taking part in this year's Fei Tian Awards. Unfortunately for her, she was completely suppressed by Tang Ning's survivor. And now, Tang Ning even took in her enemy. How was she to accept it? So, it was only a matter of time before Feng Jing contacted Tang Ning through her agency. On the other end of the phone, this roughly 40-year-old woman sounded confident and experienced. Tang Ning, as a junior, you should respect your seniors. Do you think you're in control of which direction the industry is headed? Stop being a busybody. After hearing this, Tang Ning burst out laughing. Feng Ji, I hope you can keep calm as when you stole from others and moved up through the industry. From the looks of it, you're determined to be my enemy. Hong Ji simply wants to be an actress again. Her? She's old and ugly. Ha ha. Even you're barely any match for me. Chapter 925. You're already living in my room. Don't tell me about righteousness or fairness. In this industry, all I know is, the winner takes all. Tang Ning, if you have a move to make, then throw it at me. After she was done talking, Feng Jing hung up the phone. Just behind Tang Ning, Mo Ting had heard her conversation with Feng Jing. As he carried one of the kids in his arms, his expression remained calm. Did someone try to threaten you again? Why do you keep getting threatened? I can't help it. Whenever I'm persistent about something, I always end up offending someone. Is President Mo tired of protecting me? Tang Ning turned around and smiled. Mo Ting shook his head as he placed their son on the floor and pulled Tang Ning into his embrace. No, you don't know how special you are to me. There weren't many people in this world that were brave enough to go against convention. But, Tang Ning was definitely someone that was up for the challenge and didn't easily admit defeat. No matter what, I'll first meet with Hongji. Always bring your bodyguards with you and take note of your safety. This was Mo Ting's most basic request for Tang Ning. Tang Ning nodded her head and wrapped her arms tightly around him. Probably because so much had happened lately, Tang Ning only felt safe and at ease when she was in Mo Ting's arms. That's enough, Zichen is still outside. Let me bring him in. After speaking, Mo Ting turned around to open the door. But, the little rascal, Mo Zichen, ended up crawling in from the living room on his own and stared cheekily at his father with his big round eyes. He wasn't like Mo Zixi. He didn't ask to be carried as soon as he saw Mo Ting come home. In fact, it wasn't something that he cared for. He was just like a little adult. When this rascal grows up, he's going to be trouble. Tang Ning couldn't help but laugh. Mo Ting humphed. Developing an early understanding means he'll learn quickly. But he's still so young. He's Mo Ting and Tang Ning's son. The little rascal didn't understand what his parents were saying yet as he wiggled his butt and shuffled towards his bed. Of course, he couldn't climb up on his own. So, in the end, Mo Ting swiped him up and placed him on top of the bed. Mo Zichen sat on the bed and stared straight at his father. After staring at each other for a while, he turned and picked up a toy next to him and completely ignored Mo Ting. He could happily play on his own. Tang Ning was surprised by the way the father and son interacted. For some reason, Mo Zichen's actions were nothing like a 1 to 2-year-old child. This kid is so smart. I wonder who he inherited it from. Of course he got it from you, Mo Ting said as he patted Tang Ning on the head. You sure know how to make me happy. Mo Ting smiled. After coaxing the kids to sleep, he returned to the bedroom. No matter how much conflict there was in the outside world, he was always Tang Ning's warmth and happiness. Meanwhile, Lin Qian was about to start on her new project. But, before that was to happen, Mother Li had been hounding her for a while about making things official with Li Jin. She wanted her to be Li Jin's rightful wife. Qian, I don't mean to offend you, but I would like to ask if you have any other family members at home. Why were you adopted by the Quan family? After hearing Mother Li's questions, Lin Qian felt a little uncomfortable. But, she understood that she shouldn't hide anything from the Li family since she was living in their home and they treated her so well. If you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. Lin Qian shook her head and said while sitting at the dining table, Auntie, I don't actually know about my background or family history. From the time I began to understand things, I was already with the Quan family. After that, I spent most of my youth studying abroad. So, I honestly don't know if I have any relatives. As soon as Mother Li heard this, she immediately wrapped Lin Qian in her arms. If you can't remember anything, then don't think about it. From now on, we will be your parents, dear child. You are a loyal and righteous person, the old man and I truly like you. Jinner also likes you too. That's why we hope to see the two of you settle down soon. But, your work doesn't change anything. Keep working if you want to. I'm not a close-minded person that needs to be waited upon by her daughter-in-law. I also want to see women being strong and independent. So, go ahead and do what you need to do. Lin Qian felt like she had exhausted an entire lifetime of luck on meeting Li Jin and the Li family. When she thought about the way that Mother Li treated her, she couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Tang Ning was a great friend and boss. Li Jin was a good lover and soulmate. On top of that, Mother Li doted on her. At that moment, Lin Qian felt like her life was perfect. So, as soon as Li Jin returned home, she couldn't help but say to him, "I agree to getting married." "Huh?" Li Jin froze while undressing from his military uniform. "I said, I agree to getting married." As he looked at her blushing cheeks, Li Jin picked Lin Qian up in his arms and placed her on top of the dressing table. "Of course you agree. Did you think you could still escape? You're already living in my room. Let's be serious. I want you to investigate my background. I heard that it's possible to check one's fingerprint and find family records in the database." "What if your birth parents are bad people?" Li Jin asked. "Are you sure that you're ready to accept all outcomes? I want to marry you and do it with a clean background. I don't want something messy to appear out of nowhere and embarrass your family. After all, your family has been so good to me." Li Jin hugged Lin Qian and nodded his head, "Okay." Meanwhile, over at the new television program, the host finally appeared after 3 days of preparation without him. Zai Hanmo could tell that Zhu Qing's injuries weren't light, but he was desperately enduring the pain to the point where his face had turned white. Even so, it didn't matter. Just because a jerk was unwell, it didn't mean that he wasn't a jerk anymore. "Zhu Qing, you're not looking too well. Are you sure that you're okay?" The staff immediately ran over to support him. "I'm fine. Let's continue." "Zhu Qing, you are such a professional." As soon as Zai Hanmo heard this, she couldn't help but sneer. "Zhu Qing's good at playing the pity game." "Should I tell everyone why you got hurt?" "Zai Hanmo, there's no need to push me into a dead end," Zhu Qing warned. "The fun's not over yet. I love watching you answer to me. After all, don't you need to follow President Liu's orders? I love the feeling of stepping all over you, so I would never let things end so easily." Zhu Qing looked at Zai Hanmo and glared at her. However, Zai Hanmo simply laughed. "I know what you're thinking. You want to destroy me, don't you? Let me warn you, Zhu Qing, it's best you don't compete with me in ruthlessness. I would put my life on the line just to make you suffer. Even if I'm to die, I'll drag you down with me." "You're a psycho," Zhu Qing scoffed before he left. But, he was indeed suffering. After all, he was too afraid to return home. All he could do for now was stay at the hospital because he was afraid of being caught and beaten again.
Hit the like, thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening.